All right, boys, I think today we should rank exotic weapons. Let's start with Ace of Spades. I think it's B because I can't think of a reason to use it outside of PvP.
But Donnie, think about Cade. You gotta bump it up for him, for the GOAT.
Joe, get Cade's meat out of your mouth. We're ranking the weapon, not the lore behind it.
Yeah, it's gotta be a B tier. It's only useful in Crucible.
Okay, B tier it is. Next up, we got Xenophage. What do you guys think?
Honestly, it's pretty good in every game mode, but isn't ever quite the meta, so I'd go A.
I don't even have it, so I have no clue where to put it.
Of course you don't, Joe, you geriatric Neanderthal. Regardless, I'm with Barack. It's definitely a solid A.
Same here, I gotta go with A. It's the jack of all trades, but master of none.
Now we're gonna look at Telesto, which honestly I have an A because of all the goofy shit it's been responsible for.
Hell nah, Donnie, that buggy piece of shit needs to be eradicated just like your toupee.
Good one, Joe, but I'm kind of in the middle. I think it's pretty mid, so I'll go with C tier.
Gotta go with Obama on this one. Can't think of any scenarios off the top of my head where Telesto is the go-to option.
All right, I'll settle for C tier. Moving on, though, we got the OG exotic Jallarhorn. Personally, I'm going with A since it's really good, but doesn't quite live up to the legend it was in D1.
Yeah, I can't put it S tier when it gets outdone by a bunch of legendary rockets.
Come on, guys, you're being too harsh. It's S tier. The fact that it gives other rockets Wolfpack rounds is so good.
Sorry, Joe, but it's definitely A. It works as a support rocket. Like Barack said, there are legendary rockets that output more DPS even without Wolfpack rounds.
All right, how about Anarchy now? It's got to be S tier for me, considering how it ran PvE for like 3 years straight.
Yep, S tier.
For sure, S tier.
Easy S tier.
Well, that was easy. Now we got Dead Man's Tale. I'd put it in B for the same reasons as Ace of Spades.
I can get behind that.
But you guys are forgetting that it can get random rolls and get things like Vorpal, so I think it has a case for A.
Joe, you have more of a case to be put in a nursing home than DMT does to be put in A. It's definitely a B tier.
Okay, I have a feeling I know where this one is going, but Salvation's Grip.
Delete it.
Immediate F tier.
Dogshit weapon F tier.
Yeah, easy F. All right, what do you guys think about Ager's Scepter?
Trying to get the Catalyst when it first came out caused me so much pain I won't go higher than C tier.
Yeah, for real, that shit gave me heart palpitations.
Also, it's only really worth the exotic slot if you're doing a stasis build, so I'd go C tier.
C tier works for me.
Can we look at Arbalest now? It's one of my favorite, and I think it's S tier for me.
Sure, but it's not S tier. Now that shields aren't as tough to break, it's not quite as useful. It's probably A.
Yeah, I don't think I would have put it in S, even when it was good for matching shield.
Gotta go with Donnie on this one. The fact shields aren't that big a deal pushes it down to A.
Now let's check out another oldie, Bad Juju. I'd say C tier because other weapons can have Thresh.
Nah, it's got to be B tier because it ups the damage and gives more super energy than Thresh.
I could go C or B. I don't really see many people using it.
I think B tier is good because it's not too hard to keep string of curses going.
I guess B works. But we're going to look at Bastion now, which I have in B tier.
It's pretty decent in PvP, but I can't remember a time when I used it in PvE, so I'm going with C tier.
I think it's good in PvP, and it's pretty decent at taking down champions in PvE, so I can get behind B tier.
I think I'm on Joe's side with this one, C tier.
Since we're split, we'll put it bottom of B tier for right now. I'm going to lump these next three together because they're pretty similar in that they're not particularly great at anything, but also not terrible. So Black Talon, Borealis, and Cerberus, I'd all put in C tier. Does anyone have any issues with that?
No issues with that.
Works for me.
Sounds good.
Okay, we've got Cloud Strike now, which I've got in A since it's good in PvP for multi-kills and decent in PvE depending on the boss.
But it's so good in PvP, I mean, the multi-kills with it are free. I think it deserves S tier.
No shot, Joe. You're really losing it now. Might be time to take some more meds because it's a definite A.
What Datto said.
Let's take a look at Cold Heart now, which I'd say is D tier.
I get that it's not good, but I'd say C tier because it's sometimes good in PvP.
Nah, it's definitely D tier.
Realistically, the only exotic trace rifle people will use consistently is Divinity, so I'm going D tier.
Now we got the Vow Raid Exotic Collective Obligation.
I like how it can apply void debuffs after stealing them, but it's a bit too circumstantial, so it's a B tier for me.
B tier seems about right.
Yeah, B tier is good. Also the fact that the weapon itself is kind of ugly.
I don't think it's ugly. It's a nice change of pace for how weapons look, but it's still a B tier. All right, next we've got Crimson. I've got it in A because it's honestly pretty good in both PvP and PvE.
Yeah, I love the health regen from it, but I don't think it's useful enough to be A.
I'm torn between A and B tier. Datto, what do you think?
I think there's enough mods that allow for constant health regen now to where Crimson is more useful in PvP than PvE, so I'd go B tier.
Okay, moving on, we've got Cryosthesia, which I think is just a gimmicky weapon that I'd put in C tier.
Yeah, the ability to freeze enemies just bumps it out of D tier for me.
I don't know, I think it can synergize pretty well with some stasis builds, which in my opinion puts it into B tier.
Joe, you gotta be fucking with me. You did not unironically say Cryosthesia is higher than C tier.
Now we got Darcy thoughts.
Excuse me, who? Put that bitch in the trash can.
Joe spitting right now, F tier.
But you guys are forgetting that it's the only good way to measure distances in game.
Yeah, since it can measure distances, I think it deserves D tier.
Okay, Dead Messenger now, and as much as it infuriates me in PvP, it's pretty good. And it's not bad in PvE either, so it's an A for me.
Yeah, A is good with me.
Same here.
Yeah, it's a good one, even amongst the other legendary wave-frame grenade launchers.
Easy enough, now it's Deathbringer, which even though it can put out good DPS, it's only in specific scenarios.
I could go B tier with it since it's actually not terrible in PvP.
Nah, Joe, I gotta go C tier. It's too dependent on the scenario you're in for it to be good.
Barack and Donnie, you guys hit the nail on the head. Put that thing in C tier.
Next, we got Devil's Ruin. I'd honestly say D tier.
I can rock with D tier. I think the charged up laser is cool, but the weapon is more of just a novelty.
I'd say C tier because it can do pretty well in the Crucible.
Yeah, but it's still not worth the exotic slot, so D tier.
Honestly, I don't think there's going to be any argument about this next one. It's Divinity, and I say S tier.
Can't really argue with you on that one.
Yeah, as Div Bitch, I can attest that it's a must-have in PvE.
Can't go wrong with S tier there. So many metas rely on Divinity to actually work.
Now we got one that's not as cut and dry. Duality, which I'd say is B tier since it's pretty good in PvP.
Yeah, it's definitely a worthwhile shotty for PvP.
True.
I think that works. B tier is a good place for it.
Going to do another group with these next three. We got the Exotic Glaives, which I'd put in F tier.
Same here, delete them.
Yeah, they're trash.
Honestly, just a waste of space. Get rid of them.
Ariana's Vow now, which I'd say is just above average.
Yeah, being able to one-shot with an empowering rift is cool. I think B tier is good.
Yeah, I like to pair it with a bow, and it does pretty well.
Not to mention it's not half bad for dealing with champions.
Now it's Eyes of Tomorrow, which I mean isn't terrible, but it's not sensational either. B tier.
Pretty good in Gambit, at least.
Joe, who the hell cares about Gambit?
I mean, it is still good for burst DPS, so I think B tier is about right.
Next up is Fighting Lion, which I wouldn't be caught dead with outside PvP C tier.
Even in PvP, it's kind of hard to be good with, but yeah, C tier.
Joe's finally right for once, C tier.
Yeah, I'd say Fighting Lion is pretty mid.
Okay, now we're looking at Forerunner, which is the same deal as Fighting Lion. I'd never use it outside of PvP C tier.
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever seen someone use the grenade it makes.
It's C tier at best, honestly.
Next up, we've got a bit of a sleeper with Grand Overture. I'd say A.
I'd go with A too. It can put out some pretty good numbers now.
I don't know, I'd go B tier because I'm still taking Thunderlord over it.
Joe, you're wrong, but still it's an A for me too.
Graviton Lance now, boys. I've got it in B tier, but what do you guys think?
I'm a big fan of it in PvP. I think it could even go A.
I wouldn't quite go A with it, but it's still a very solid B tier.
I'm with Biden. The Black Hole and Cosmology perks are both pretty good.
Okay, now let's look at Hard Light. Honestly, it's my favorite exotic auto rifle, but I'd still only put it B tier.
Yeah, it's definitely not C tier because it can be really good in PvP sometimes.
Hardlight is one of my favorite weapons to use in PvP, even though it's not meta right now.
It's also not terrible in PvE, so I think B tier is good.
Next, we got Hawkmoon, which I'd say B tier since it's pretty good in PvP.
I don't really have anything to add. B tier seems good.
I'd put it in A since it can one-shot in PvP.
Sorry, Joe, but that ain't it. A is for weapons that are good in more than just one game mode or are completely meta in one mode.
Well, that one was pretty simple. Now we've got Heir Apparent. What do you guys think?
It's pretty mid.
Yeah, it's only really useful for the shield it can produce, and even that isn't always super useful.
Joe took the words right out of my mouth. C tier.
I was going to say C tier too, so that works. Next up, we've got another one that I'd consider an easy S tier. Izanagi's Burden.
See, I don't know why people say it's so good. When I use it, I only do okay DPS, B tier.
Joe, you sleepy son of a bitch, that's because you don't hold reload and just fire 4 regular shots like an absolute buffoon.
Yeah, there's no question that Izzy is S tier.
Okay, moving on, we have Jotun, which I'd say is B tier since it's okay in PvP and PvE.
Yeah, it doesn't really stand out to me in either mode, but it gets the job done.
Joe, I agree with you, but how do you go from having 0 brain cells to then making a cohesive argument about a weapon?
Yeah, I've been wondering that as well, but I'd also go B tier.
I don't know, guys, but every time I pop one of these Flintstone gummies, my brain feels less foggy. Jill only lets me have a few in a day, though.
All right, Joe, you better go find some more because we've got a lot left. Now it's Le Monarque, which I'd say is a strong A, maybe even S tier.
I don't think it counts as meta, so I go A for right now.
Same here.
Yeah, it synergizes so well with a bunch of different builds, so I'm fine with A.
Legend of Acrius, which I don't think I've ever seen someone use, so I'd say F tier.
On God, I have a better chance of remembering something than people do of remembering that weapon.
True, that thing is garbage.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if it was gone. F tier.
Okay, now it's Leviathan's Breath, which with the buff from this season, I'd say is a solid A tier.
True, it can do some really good DPS now after the buff.
I've been waiting for a good reason to use it, so I have no problem with A.
It can also one-shot people in a well, so it's good in PvP too. A works for me.
Now Lord of Wolves, which has fallen off hard, I'd say B tier because of the terror it caused in PvP back in the day.
Yeah, 90% of people playing were using it.
Honestly, one of the most busted weapons in PvP ever.
I'd personally say C tier because it's been mid longer than it was good, but B tier doesn't bother me too much.
Next up is Lawrence Driver, which I'd say is B tier because it's easy pickings in PvP with it on.
It literally feels like what I imagine controller aim assist feels like when using that on mouse and keyboard. B tier.
Even I'm able to pop heads with it, so yeah, B tier.
I got nothing to add on that one. B tier seems right.
Got another group now with Malfeasance, Lumina, and Sturm, which I'd put in C tier. They're all very mid to me.
Lumina, I think, has a case for B tier, but yeah, based on how we have stuff already, I'd say they're all C tier.
Definitely all pretty mid.
C tier is right where they belong.
All right, now we got Wave Splitter, which I dare say is an A tier. I see plenty of people use it with great success in PvP and PvE.
I don't think it's good enough to warrant being A, but it's very close.
I'm going to go with Donnie on this one. Feels more like an A to me.
Same here, I'd say it fits right in the A tier.
Next up is Monte Carlo, which again I have in B tier since it's good in PvP and not much else.
Factual statement right there, Don.
True, also I like the ability to get melee energy back off of kills.
No problems here, B tier.
Now it's No Time to Explain, which I have high in B tier for the same reasons as Monte Carlo, except it's just a better weapon.
Yeah, nothing to add here.
Don't forget about the time slip perk, which is really good. Either way, it's still B tier.
Facts.
All right, next is the Last Wish Rate Exotic, 1,000 Voices. What do you guys think?
I'd say B tier because it's valid in PvP and PvE, but isn't really that great.
Sorry, Barack, but I think it's A because there's been quite a few times where it's been able to deal insane damage and was the meta.
Rare Joe W right there.
Sleepy Joe spitting right now, I'd say A as well. Moving on, we got Osteostriga, and I'm just going to come out and say it, S tier.
I want to say you're wrong, but I can't really justify why it shouldn't be S tier.
Sleeper S tier, pick Donnie, I like it.
The damage over time on this weapon and its ability to work with most builds definitely warrants S tier for me.
Might be a back-to-back S tier here because we got Outbreak perfected now. Anyone opposed to that?
Nope.
Not me.
After the buffs it got, I'd say that's fair.
Moving on, we got a less well-rounded option with Parasite. I'd say B tier.
I would never use it in PvP, but it's good for burst DPS, so B tier seems adequate.
It's good for one-phasing Atrax, but I can't think of much else.
Yeah, it's only really useful for burst DPS, so B tier seems okay.
All right, next up is Polaris Lance, which after the recent buffs, I'd say it's A.
Yeah, I never used it that much before the buff, but now that it applies Scorch stacks, I use it a lot more.
Yeah, it's valid in PvP and PvE.
Now that it works well with Solar 3.0, it definitely sits in A for me.
Another group coming up, we got Prometheus Lens, Prospector, and Ruinous Effigy, all of which I feel are just mid at best.
Even though Prometheus Lens and Ruinous Effigy now work with the updated subclasses, I still have to agree that they're C tier.
I haven't touched any of those in years.
I'd even be fine if they were in D tier.
Now we're looking at Rat King, which I'd put in C, since it's only good if your entire team is running it.
True, your entire team has to run it, but being able to take down raid bosses with it is crazy enough to where I'd say B tier.
I gotta agree with Barack on that one, B tier.
I'm feeling generous on this one, so I'll lean towards B tier as well.
Don't really agree with B tier, but that's fine. Next is Risk Runner. What do you guys think?
Bottom of A because it can be really strong in PvP and PvE with the right build.
I was gonna say B tier, but after thinking about it, I have to agree with Datto.
Same here, I have no problem with putting it in A.
Well, there's a reason Datto's the expert. I gotta go A now, too. Moving on, it's Sleeper Simulant, which I have in B tier.
I'd say A because it can do some nasty DPS.
Yeah, Joe, it can sometimes, but it always requires the right scenario. It's never been all around the ideal choice.
Barack's right, it's either bad or Bungie buffs it, but it still gets outdone by legendary linears. B tier.
All right, next up is Sunshot, which again I'd say B tier for the same reasons as the other weapons that are geared towards one game mode.
No complaints here.
Yeah, B tier seems good to me.
You guys are forgetting that it can apply Scorch and cause ignitions now, so it's also viable in PvE.
Good point, but it still isn't going to be taking up most people's exotic slot for PvE. Now we've got a D1 classic, Suros Regime, which unfortunately I have to say is worse than Sunshot, but still B tier for similar reasons.
It makes me sad to say it, but you're right.
I miss Suros Regime being super good.
Take me back to glory days. Nevertheless, it's still B tier and D2.
Next up is Sweet Business, which if you're not a Titan, then I don't know why you're using it. C tier.
I'm right with you, Donnie. It's a cool idea, and I like having a Gatling gun as an auto rifle, but quite frankly, it's mid.
It's above average. You guys are being unfair. I'd be happy with bottom of B tier.
No can do, Barack. The fact that unless you're a Titan with Armamentarium, it's not anything special, most definitely warrants C tier.
Taraba now, which might be controversial, but I'm putting it in A.
No shot. That goes against the way we've been ranking other weapons geared toward one mode. B tier.
I also think it's A because it stands out enough in PvP to be bumped up to that next tier.
I'm on Datto's side. It should be B tier.
All right, for the sake of consistency, we'll put it in B tier. Next one is Chaperone, which I'd also put in A, but I assume we're going to end up putting it in B tier because of the precedent we've set.
Yep.
I also think it's A because it stands out enough in PvP to be bumped up to that next tier.
Correct.
Now we've got the Colony, which I feel like is just a waste. D tier.
I'd say delete it. No one really uses it.
Sometimes I like to use it, though, Barack.
Joe, that's because your frontal cortex is breaking down. I'm with Donnie. D tier.
Fourth Horseman now, which is always a good burst DPS option. B tier.
No complaints there, B tier.
Yeah, same thing as Parasite. It can be really good at specific encounters, but overall it's a B tier.
Yeah, if the reload speed were faster, it could make the jump to A, but for now it's B tier.
Moving on, we have Huckleberry, which isn't even that good in PvP, C tier.
It's literally a much worse Taraba. C tier.
Yep, C tier.
Can't argue with you guys there, it's just not that good, C tier.
Now we have a group of scout rifles, including Symmetry, Jade Rabbit, Skyburner's Oath, and Mida Multi-Tool, which I'd say are D tier.
I want to say this is harsh, but scouts aren't that good to begin with, and these just don't really bring much to the table.
Remember when you could team kill with Symmetry, though? That was kind of fun. Still D tier, though.
Right there with you guys, D tier.
Last word next, which if we were just talking about console would probably be an A, but overall it's a B tier.
The recoil on it is just really hard to deal with.
Another D1 exotic that just didn't quite live up to the hype. B tier.
I love using last word in PvP, but in reality it's not anything special. B tier.
Moving on, we've got the Queenbreaker, which I haven't used once in the 5 years it's been out. D tier.
It's a cool looking weapon, but it's never been worth an exotic slot.
I haven't even taken the time to get it. D tier.
It's just straight up not good, D tier.
Bit of a controversial one now, Wardcliffe Coil. It's been responsible for some weird stuff through the years, but it's had some moments where it shined. B tier.
Yeah, it does well at the weirdest things.
True, sometimes it does basically nothing. Then other times it's the best DPS option for no reason. B tier.
I'd say it balances out to C tier, but I'm not going to throw a fit with it in B tier.
I know where this one's going to end up, but it still has a special place in many players' hearts, Thorn. By principle, it'll go in B tier, which is where I think it belongs, but it's one of my favorite weapons.
Same here, Don. I love Thorn, but it is a B tier.
You guys already said what I was thinking. B tier.
Off topic, but the D1 mission to get Thorn was cooler than the one in D2. B tier.
Next up is Tiku's Divination, which I've got in A because even though it's better in PvE, it's still viable in PvP. Also, the auto-tracking arrows are a nice touch.
It pairs really well with solar builds, too. Also, the explosion is great at taking out ads and finishing off people in Crucible.
I think it's bottom of A, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah, overall a slept-on weapon. I have no issue putting it in A.
Now it's Tommy's Matchbook, which I rarely see getting used, but it's actually not that bad. I'd say it's a B tier.
I think the fact that people don't use it a lot says enough. C tier.
The perks are cool and can be pretty good if used right, so I'm okay with B tier.
I'm with Barack on this. Even though it has cool perks and good potential, it's not good enough to make many people use it. C tier.
I'll settle for C tier on this one. Your guy's argument persuaded me. Traveler's Chosen now, which I have in C tier. It's too easy to keep your abilities up, so you don't really need a weapon to help with that.
Agreed. If it weren't an exotic, it'd be worth it. C tier.
Yeah, I'm fine with C tier since it's actually not bad as a sidearm.
C tier works for me.
Okay, now it's the Goat of Adclear Trinity Ghoul. I think it's an easy A.
Same here. The only reason it's not S tier is because Wither Horde exists.
It used to be so good for farming power levels, I've seen people with millions of kills on it.
I've even seen people go crazy with it in Crucible. Easy A.
Tractor Cannon now, which I'd put in B tier because it's a nice debuff, but I think a DPS exotic is a better option.
Yeah, I just used Tether on Hunter and used something like Izanagi's for damage.
Joe, you don't even use Izanagi's correctly, but either way, it's still a B tier.
There's so many ways to debuff enemies now that it's just more beneficial to use something that does damage. It's still good, but B tier is as high as I'd go.
Next up is Truth, which I'd honestly just delete. It's so bad.
So many rockets have tracking now that it's just not worth it.
Also, it does terrible damage in PvE, so there's no reason to use it.
Nothing else to say except it's a bad weapon, F tier.
Coming up on another group with Thunderlord, Two-Tailed Fox, and Lament, which I all feel are pretty solid in A.
Don, you dropping bars right now?
Yeah, I never thought Two-Tailed Fox would be good, but now that they've added a third arc rocket, it's actually really good.
No problem putting them in A. They're all top-tier PvE options.
Next up is a weapon that's not so good, Merciless. I would rather use something like Glaciocasm, so I'm putting it in C tier.
I'll make the argument for B tier. It can be decent in PvP, but the speeding up of consecutive shots makes it pretty good for dealing chunks of damage in PvE.
I was going to say C tier, but I didn't think about the PvE side of it.
Yeah, I'd always chalked Merciless down as mid.
I guess we can go with B tier then. All right, moving on, we've got Vex Mythoclast, which I'd say is B tier.
Yeah, it's good in PvP and PvE, but I don't know if I'd use my exotic slot for it.
I like using it, but in high-end content, it seems to fall behind a bit. I'd still go with A, though.
I'm on Joe's side here. It might not be as OP as it used to be, but it's still usable in endgame activities.
We're split, but we'll put it in A for now. Next up is Vigilance Wing, which I gotta say is pretty mid.
But the exotic perk is pretty good for competitive PvP. I'd say B tier.
No shot, Barack. If you are taking advantage of being the last person alive that often, then you need a new team. It's most definitely C tier.
Yeah, I hardly ever use it, C tier.
Now we've got a community favorite, Whisper of the Worm, which unfortunately is B tier, but we all know it can be S tier with a buff.
I just want the sniper DPS meta to come back so badly. It hurts to say, but B tier.
Yeah, it was one of the best secret missions ever, and it's sad to say it's B tier.
You guys are right, but I'm still holding out hope that Bungie will make it meta again.
Moving on, we have the wall hack exotic Wishender. I'd say B tier, it's just above average.
The wall hacks make my life so much easier in PvP.
Joe, just learn how to aim. It's not that hard. Still, it's B tier.
Yeah, I'd say the wall hacks bring it from a C to a B tier.
Next up is the undisputed Goat Wither Horde S tier.
No question, S tier.
That's my goat for sure.
Easy S?
Now it's World Line Zero, which is just such an easy D tier for me.
Now that we have Eager Edge, it just doesn't even matter anymore.
It looks cool, but it just doesn't deserve an exotic slot. D tier.
Absolute booty cheeks. D tier.
Heart Shadow now, which I think has a lot of potential but hasn't really had the time to shine yet. B tier.
I can agree with that.
I do like how it can turn you invisible. B tier.
Also, the fact that it can weaken targets is pretty good. B tier.
Next is Trespasser, and all I have to say is meh.
Exotic sidearms usually just aren't it. C tier.
I'd rather use Drang C tier.
I just can't think of a scenario where it's any better than average. C tier.
Moving on is Delicate Tomb, which I would say is another C tier weapon.
Same here, I'm not a big fan of the horizontal spread.
Never used it that much, but when I did, it was just okay.
C tier seems about right.
Now it's Quicksilver Storm. What do you guys think?
I think it's really fun to use. I love the different firing modes.
Yeah, the homing rockets are pretty cool. B tier.
I'd say it's just above average, so B tier works for me.
I was also going to say B tier, so that works out well. Another D1 classic, Touch of Malice, which I think has a case for A.
Sorry, Don, but you're tweaking. It's definitely a B tier.
Yeah, Donnie, I think it's good in PvE and decent in PvP, but it's definitely B tier.
I can see the argument for A, but it's just not good enough to get over that hurdle.
Next is Hierarchy of Needs, which I think is really cool and decent in PvE. So it's a B tier for me.
B tier is good. I love the guidance ring aspect of it.
The bow itself doesn't look too crazy, but the perks definitely make it stand out.
Really fun to use. B tier.
Second to last one, we have the Manticore, which is just Wings of Sacred Dawn, the weapon. C tier.
It's not even top 2 exotic SMGs, so C tier.
No argument there. C tier.
Yeah, definitely a C tier.
Final one, Revision Zero, which I personally would put in B tier.
B tier is good. I like being able to switch between 2 and 4 burst shots.
Yeah, it's honestly just a really solid pulse rifle in PvP. B tier.
The alternate sniper firing mode is also a nice touch. B tier.